The moment SpaceX hit the Nasdaq at a $1.77 trillion valuation, closed day one at $2.1 trillion, raised $75 billion in cash, and made Elon Musk the first trillionaire in human history, something clicked for me. Musk isn't building rockets. He's building a dream. And the machine that built this particular dream wasn't a launch pad. It was Twitter. 4 years ago, Musk paid $44 billion for Twitter, and then walked away from its only profitable business, advertising. By the conventional logic of running a media company, that move makes no sense. But if you change the lens, if you assume that Twitter was, from day one, a 4-year support machine engineered for the SpaceX IPO, every confusing move suddenly snaps into place. Because the dream is what's worth $1.77 trillion, not the rockets. SpaceX, by the way, lost $4.9 billion last year. It has accumulated $41.3 billion in losses since 2002. Its price-to-sales ratio at IPO is 94, 3 times Nvidia's. Morningstar, the rating agency, published a report saying SpaceX's fair value is less than half of what it priced at. The Nation magazine called the merger that folded X into SpaceX vaporware. None of it moved the price. Because as long as 600 million pairs of ears on X belonged to him, the valuation was never going down. Twitter was the machine that built the dream, from start to finish. So how did he actually use Twitter to build the dream? Step 1. Rewrite the algorithm. 3 months after Musk took over Twitter in February 2023, a Super Bowl tweet of his got fewer impressions than a tweet from Joe Biden. Musk flew his private jet from Phoenix back to San Francisco overnight. At 2:36 a.m., his brother James Musk sent an urgent Slack message to the engineering team. Quote, "We are debugging an issue with engagement across the platform." 80 sleep-deprived engineers logged on. The assignment? Build a tool, internally codenamed Power User Multiplier, that applied to exactly one user ID. His. The tool bypassed every fairness check in the recommendation system and multiplied his individual tweet weight by a factor of 1,000. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It was reported by Platformer, a tech outlet run by Casey Newton and Zoe Schiffer, directly from internal Slack records at the time. In 2024, the peer-reviewed academic journal PLOS ONE published a study replicating his account metrics. View counts up 138% year over year. Retweets up 238%. Likes up 186%. The curve jumps to a new step in July 2024. The unmistakable shape of an algorithm tuned by hand. From that moment forward, Musk became the loudest, most frequent, hardest-to-avoid voice in the ears of 600 million X users. And his follower count followed. October 2022, when he closed the Twitter deal, he had 110 million followers, third place behind Justin Bieber and Obama. By IPO day in June 2026, 234 million followers, first place on the platform. He doubled it in 4 years. 124 million additional pairs of ears wired directly to his vocal cords. Step 2. Erode the credibility of the legacy press. Amplifying his own voice wasn't enough. He had to make sure the rest of the press that might say uncomfortable things about him or his companies, lost weight in the minds of his audience. Reporters Without Borders ran an audit. Musk attacks legacy media on X, on average, nearly 3 times per day. Not with arguments, with slogans. Short, repeatable, designed to override thinking. He says legacy media lies. He says the New York Times is pure propaganda. He says the AP, the Associated Press, actually stands for Associated Propaganda. He says, defund NPR. These slogans, algorithmically amplified, hit 600 million feeds every day. Hundreds of thousands of retweets per slogan. Over a year, 3 years, 5 years, the credibility coordinate of traditional press in his audience's mind gets dragged steadily downward. CNN reports, Starship blew up again. Morningstar publishes a bear case on the valuation. The Nation calls the merger vaporware. X users see those headlines and react not with, interesting, but with, legacy media is lying again. It's not enough to amplify your own voice. The competing voices have to come pre-labeled as liars. Step 3. Feed one storyline only. With the machine tuned, he started filling it with content. And only one kind of content. Mars, Starship. Optimus the humanoid robot is going to Mars. AI data centers in orbit. Always the same handful of words, repeated until they feel inevitable. He retweets an old NASA Mars rover clip with the caption, quote, "It's time to go to Mars." One tweet, 102 million views. At conventional CPM rates, you couldn't buy that reach for tens of millions of dollars. He pays $0. A clean photo of the V3 Super Heavy booster, 6.4 million views, every Starship test flight, dozens of retweets, pins, repins. Hundreds of millions of people see the same imagery synchronized across their feed. The feeling, Mars isn't science fiction anymore, gets hammered in again and again. Meanwhile, CNN is publishing the loss numbers. Morningstar is publishing the bear case. Wall Street veterans are quietly muttering that the 94 times price-to-sales ratio is a textbook bubble. These voices are loud in the traditional press. But in the feed of 600 million X users, they are nearly invisible. And the few signals that do leak through are already pre-tagged. Legacy media lies. That's the actual mechanism of dream-making. It's not that anyone is lying to you about a fact. It's that you only ever easily see the facts he wants you to see. Mars, Mars, Mars. 3 months of scrolling and you start to think, this is the future. Then you write a check for SpaceX. The $4.9 billion loss line in the prospectus, you never even scrolled to it. You don't care. Which leads to the single observation that explains everything that follows. The people pricing this IPO weren't reading the prospectus. They were reading the temperature of the narrative on X. If you think this machine can only make dreams, you're underestimating it. The other face of the same machine is this. It can also make voices disappear. This story needs to be told in detail. Detail is the only way to grasp how much physical damage this machine can do. Twitter had a head of trust and safety named Yoel Roth. 35 years old, Jewish, openly gay, 7 years at Twitter. His most famous act in the job, in 2021, he was central to the decision to suspend Donald Trump's account. After Musk took over, Roth publicly supported the new boss. He tweeted that he believed Musk had good intentions. 13 days later, he resigned. The reason, in his own later words, procedural legitimacy completely collapsed. Musk had publicly committed to a content moderation council, and then, the next day, unilaterally began unbanning accounts on his own. Resigning was one thing, but 1 month later, on December 10, 2022, Musk personally retweeted a screenshot of Roth's old PhD thesis, a thesis about the gay dating app Grindr. Musk added a caption that, in any normal legal context, would qualify as defamation per se, directed toward the topic of minors. I am not going to repeat the specific words of that tweet in this video. What matters here is what the tweet did. That tweet, on an account with 120 million followers at the time, broadcast through an algorithm Musk had personally tuned to amplify himself, exploded. Hundreds of thousands of retweets and likes within hours. That night, Roth's inbox filled with death threats, rape threats, threats containing his home address. A British tabloid published the name of his neighborhood. He and his partner left their home of 5 years that same night. Later, in testimony before the United States Congress, Roth characterized the incident as, quote, a defamatory allegation, and stated on the public record that this lie directly produced, quote, a wave of homophobic and anti-Semitic threats and harassment against him. He sold the house. He has never gone back. He did this on day 50 of his ownership of Twitter. A man whose stated reason for buying the platform, the reason he gave the public and the press, was the protection of free speech. This is the part that actually defines what a narrative weapon is. It's not just a tool for letting you speak. The other side of the same tool is the part that makes other people stop speaking. A former employee, 13 days of disagreement, never publicly criticized the boss after resigning, and his life trajectory got flipped. Fled home, address exposed, house sold, no return. This happened in December 2022. 3.5 years before SpaceX's $1.77 trillion IPO. The analysts, the reporters, the former SpaceX engineers, the short-side hedge fund managers who might have stood up and asked, is $1.77 trillion really justified? Is Starship really going to Mars in 2026? Is Starlink growth actually plateauing? Is this whole thing vaporware? Watching what happened to Yoel Roth, would they hesitate? Whether the Roth incident is causally connected to the gradual disappearance of serious public skepticism toward SpaceX on X, that's a question every viewer can decide for themselves. But there is one fact that is undeniable. After the Roth incident, the content about SpaceX visible on X drifted closer and closer to a one-person script. Mars, Starship, AI in space. Morningstar's bear case existed. Wall Street's private skepticism existed. The prospectus showed the losses. The valuation did not move. How do you explain that? Here's one possible reading. The deepest damage a narrative machine can do isn't about what it amplifies. It's about which voices stop showing up at all. And with the dissenting voices gone, a $1.77 trillion valuation only ever hears applause on X. Once you see both the dream-making and the silencing, the final piece, the cash-out, comes into focus. The cash-out did not start on June 12, 2026. It started 4 years earlier. Rewind to April 25, 2022, 1 week before Musk publicly announced the Twitter deal. On that day, Marc Andreessen, co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, the most influential venture firm in Silicon Valley, sent Musk an encrypted message on Signal. The text of that message is now part of the public record. It read, quote, $250 million with no additional work required. Translation, I'll wire $250 million, no due diligence needed. I don't need to look at the books. Within hours, Andreessen sent a follow-up to Musk's family office manager, Jared Birchall, quote, good to go. That is the earliest frame in this entire timeline. The people who 4 years later would ride the elevator out at the top floor of the SpaceX IPO. They wrote their checks on Signal in encrypted DMS with no due diligence before the public knew anything was happening. Andreessen Horowitz eventually committed $400 million. Larry Ellison, $1 billion, Sequoia, $800 million, Bill Ackman's Foundation, Binance, Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. The total co-investor pool, $7.1 billion. The 4 years in between were not pleasant. By 2024, that A16Z $400 million stake had been written down to 112 million on paper, a $288 million paper loss. Most of the financial press was openly mocking these Silicon Valley legends for getting taken in by the world's richest man, but none of them exited. So how did the elevator make it to the top floor? March 2025, XAI acquires X, Twitter, first shell change. February 2, 2026, SpaceX acquires XAI in an all-stock deal valuing the combined entity at $1.25 trillion. Twitter, second shell change. Twitter is now formally inside SpaceX. CNBC openly calls it the largest private merger in history. The $44 billion impulse purchase the world laughed at in 2022, 4 years later, it disappears from X's balance sheet and reappears inside SpaceX's $1.77 trillion market capitalization. The shell changes. The story being told gets rewritten. The last 60 days before IPO, the machine goes into full mobilization mode. April 12th, the clean V3 booster shot on X, 6.4 million views. May 22nd, Starship V3 maiden flight. NPR's headline says the quiet part out loud. SpaceX prepares for critical launch of Starship ahead of IPO. June 1st, SEC files an amended S1. June 4th, Roadshow opens. June 12th, IPO, 1.77 trillion valuation locked in, opens at 150, closes at 161, up 19.2% on day one. Market cap, 2.1 trillion. 20 days, a viral tweet, a high-profile rocket launch, an updated prospectus, a roadshow, the biggest IPO in history. Every event precisely placed at the timestamp that maximizes downstream narrative momentum on X. Are these events independent coincidences? Are they parts of one carefully sequenced campaign? I'm putting them all on the same timeline and letting you decide. And right before the roadshow, Musk did something that visibly shocked traditional Wall Street. He personally selected Bank of America to run retail distribution. And he told the underwriters, retail will get 30% of this offering. For context, the typical retail allocation in a major US IPO is 5 to 10%. Musk wanted to give retail 3 times that. According to Reuters, citing the underwriting team, one lead banker said, quote, "We have never seen retail demand at this scale in our careers." Why give retail 30%? I'm not going to answer that question directly. I'm just going to lay the facts in front of you. For 4 years, retail investors on X have been seeing Mars, Starship, AI in space, non-stop. Institutional investors have risk models, analyst teams, PE ceilings. Retail doesn't have those tools. Retail decisions ride more on emotional resonance with a story. The retail allocation on this IPO was 3 times the conventional level. Whether these two facts are connected, that question stays with the viewer. The result? The IPO was 4 times oversubscribed. Institutional orders came in at $10 billion, $20 billion. Retail demand was so overwhelming that the underwriters were forced to cut the original 30% retail allocation down to the low 20s. Because institutions saw retail enthusiasm running this hot and piled on with bigger orders. Where did the money come from? From the pockets behind those 234 million pairs of ears that had been narratively fed on X for 4 years. Where did the money go? First, Musk himself, first trillionaire in human history. Second, SpaceX the company, $75 billion in cash raised. Third, 4,000 SpaceX employees, all paper millionaires now. Of those, 400 hold stakes worth over $100 million. From engineers to welders to cafeteria cooks, every employee was paid in stock options. Co-Gwynne Shotwell and faux Brett Johnson each hold stakes over $1 billion. Fourth, the people who wired money on Signal 4 years ago. Ellison's $1 billion turned into $2.7 billion. A 16Z's $400 million, written down to $112 million in 2024, became the single largest gain in the firm's history. The full $7.1 billion co-investor pool now owns 5% of SpaceX, worth $100 billion. Average return, 200%. Bloomberg, the night before IPO on June 11th, published a single line that captured everything. Quote, "They're not selling because they believe the stock will triple from here. They're selling because the elevator has finally reached the top floor and the doors have opened." What's the elevator? It's the machine, X. What's the top floor? It's the $1.77 trillion valuation. And retail? Retail just walked into the lobby and pressed the up button. Where does this elevator go from here? Nobody can give you a 100% answer, but here's one observation that holds in every market in financial history. The people who got on the elevator first do not exit the same way as the people who got on last. We tend to think the rich are smarter than us because they work harder, take more risks, understand technology better. Wrong. They are smarter because they saw, earlier than we did, what is actually valuable. We thought the product mattered most. He understood the story matters most. We thought earnings hold up stock prices. He understood attention holds up stock prices. We thought Twitter was just Twitter. He understood Twitter was a microphone. We thought $44 billion was a failed acquisition. He understood it was the down payment on a $1.77 trillion IPO. The next time you see one of the world's richest people make a move that doesn't make sense, don't be quick to join the mockery. Ask yourself one question first. Where does this move eventually pay him back? 90% of the world still thinks Musk bought Twitter on impulse. The people who actually saw what he was doing, they got on the elevator 4 years ago, with him. They are standing on the top floor right now. The doors are open. The rest of us are still in the basement. A stock price is not held up by earnings. It's held up by a story. A story is not made of facts. It is made of amplified facts. Whoever holds the amplifier holds the stock price. 4 years ago, Musk paid $44 billion. What he bought was the amplifier. A final note. Every timeline, every number, every direct quote in this video comes from public reporting and SEC filings. The major sources are linked in the description and pinned comment. But all of the causal connections, all of the reading of why these events fit together, those are interpretive. They are one analyst's reading of public facts. They are not legal findings of intent. What you do with that reading is your call. What I have done is put a series of apparently unrelated moves on a single timeline. The timeline speaks for itself.